To understand the whole, we need to know what the parts are. So let's look at all the different parts and then see how they fit the bigger picture all the time. So if you've always got an understanding, if you always know where the bigger picture is, okay, let's take out a part, political, educational, health, philosophical, psychological, whatever it is, let's take out a part, let's understand that, but we can only truly understand it in its connection, where it's come from. So by focusing on all the different parts, we can then understand the whole, but we must always keep sight of the whole.
The Larry Show.
So I was looking at your bio.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different aspects to it, but in terms of your career, I would say that is pretty typical, in the sense that you build up your competence in this particular area, and then you go for this line of job, and then you continue that line of job, and then you kind of elevate your competence in that job.
Yes.
But what is not very typical is that you seem to develop this understanding. You might say spiritual, right? It's philosophically, it's probably metaphysical, you know. But people don't usually develop that kind of understanding because they do their job, they go on their life. They probably have some understanding, but they don't have that kind of understanding that is rich enough to be able to be maybe elaborated on in a book, right? Because you published a book.
Right.
So you know, that's pretty interesting, actually. So, you know, that's probably another aspect, you know, that I would like to explore, you know, asking questions.
Well, now when you say that, Larry, then when I'm thinking metaphysical, are you using the word meta as in above?
Yes.
Yes, okay, very good. Yeah, so that's exactly what my teaching job brought to my life, was the ability to go above, to be a player of life, but also to be the observer of the game. So you're living your life, but then you've got I developed somewhere in the 90s. I developed the ability to start. Well, I found self-awareness. So I developed the ability. I found the ability to observe myself, and that really means to observe my own mind, which in the Buddhist sense means that you must become detached from who you subconsciously assume you are, which is your mind and all the thoughts and the feelings that come from it.
That's right.
But I think and I know why it happened, I can trace it back to when this happened, but suddenly, I don't know whether, I can't remember the specific date, but suddenly I was able to see my mind in action instead of being my mind in action. That's
so
where that came from.
First time I came to Thailand in 1990s, I believe you were in your 20s?
Oh, yeah, I came in 91 and I was 27.
27.
Yeah.
And so when you came to Thailand, did you foresee yourself one day owning this land, for example?
No.
Settling down here with a Thai wife, with this thing that you're working on?
None of that, no. I wanted to get on a big travel adventure when I was in England. I think I thought about it. I think I thought about it a few years before that. But I wanted to get into the world, and I was planning to go to China. But at the time, it was very difficult to get a visa beyond 2 weeks, and so I gave up that idea. And then a friend had just come back from 6 months in Thailand, and he was telling me his stories of Chiang Mai and Koh Samui and so on. I thought, well, I'm going there. That's where I want to go. So I was just having visions of not working, of being in the tropical jungles and the tropical beaches, and you know, like at the time I had the Lonely Planet book, which was, have you heard of the Lonely Planet book?
I've heard of it.
So these were the big travel guide for travelers, not tourists, for travelers. There's a big distinction between the two. And it was talking about, you know, £4 a night for a bungalow, and you know, 40 pence for breakfast. So I thought, oh, that looks good. So, you know, Thailand fitted all the boxes. So I saved up I got my money together, left the job, came over here. And the big plan was to try and come here for a year. But by the time I came here, I was going to be lucky to get 6 months, because it's all up to the money. But I did come here with the idea that I might somehow be able to get a job teaching English. So I went to the local library, no internet. I went to the local library at home, and I had a list of about 6 or 7 English language teaching schools in Bangkok. And when the money ran out in Bangkok, and I didn't even have a ticket home, because in those days you could have a one-way ticket, no credit card. So I had to go and get a job. So anyway, on the second day, I got myself the job. And the whole purpose by now was, I'm not ready to go back to England. It's the middle of the winter, it's freezing cold. I told all my friends I'd be gone for a year. I'm back in 3 or 4 months. That's not very good for my image, all that sort of thing. So when I got the job, it was just, well, maybe I can stay for a year. Just 1 year would be good. And then what changed it, Larry, was that that when I started teaching, knowing nothing about the teaching game, and it was adults and 16, 18-year-old university students and working adults mainly. And as soon as I started in the classroom, it was like, this is my vocation in life. I love being in this classroom, working with adults. And so I'd found a job that suited me down to the ground. And from there, I just didn't go back home. And so I accidentally emigrated.
The decision to leave England at the age of 27, you mentioned that you had a job, was not an easy one, right? Or was it an easy one?
No, it was very easy. The decision was very easy. Getting the money together was much harder. Because in England, most people struggle to get money together.
I wonder why you made the decision to go to another country, to give up your job and then to go to another country, first China probably and then Thailand?
I think the roots of that go back to when I was born. My mum was born and brought up in Kenya in Africa. My father he worked in the aviation world, so he flew a lot. And back in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, aeroplane travel was very expensive. So people didn't go on holiday really. Only rich people could fly. But my father was in the aviation business, so we used to get tickets on standby at 10%. You paid 10% of the ticket cost. And because my mum had come from Africa, and then when she got married, they moved to England. She'd never seen England before. So she's, although she's British by genetics and descent, like many people, she lived in Africa. So when I was 6 weeks old, I was on an aeroplane going over to Africa. So I think that travel was in me right from the beginning. And then when I was young, I watched the moon landing, the moon landings. We had a TV travel program when I was young called Wicker's World, and this very English gentleman flew around the world meeting famous people, ordinary people, and filming them in all these different countries. And it included the exotic East, China and Hong Kong and Macau and Thailand and Burma and all these countries around here. And I was just fascinated by it all. I loved Star Trek, which was, traveling into. So I think that it's almost as if the universe, it gives us free will, but it also says, well, this is the kind of path that we want you to take, almost, as if there's a voice that is trying to direct everybody to go where they should go. So then what happened next was that I come from the south of England, and I started working for my uncle and aunt's company, which was in Manchester in the north. And I worked in their London office, me and one other girl, for just a tourist, and we were very successful making the sales go from £2,000, £10,000 a week. And after a year, they said, we'd like you to be a trainee manager up in the head office. So that was moving up to Manchester, much cheaper, much friendlier, almost a different country. So I shot up there, So I'm not one that will, I'm born in this village, I'm going to stay in this village. So, and as many English people might tell you, in effect, I emigrated from the south to the north. And I had 4 wonderful years there. But I think one of the reasons I went north was, well, down here in the south, I can't afford a house. But in the north, much cheaper, I can afford a house. So, and in those days, you buy a house and within 2, 3, 4 years, it's worth a lot more money. So people sell their house, buy a bigger house, and just that's what they do. I think my brain was saying, right, well, I'll go north, I'll buy a house, and after 3 or 4 years, I'll sell it, keep the difference, and travel around the world. So I think it's in me from a long time ago to do this. But then I loved my life in Manchester. And then after 3 or 4 years, clearly I started getting itchy feet. And then the plan was hatched. And then, when it came to selling the house and making thousands of pounds, there was a worldwide recession. So everything plummeted. And in the end, I made £500 on my house.
Interesting.
I couldn't even sell it when I came here. My mum managed to sell it for me in my absence, but I had somebody renting it. So yeah, that was, it looks like I always wanted to go traveling. I don't remember thinking that I'll emigrate. I just wanted to travel the world.
And the decision at the beginning was, so you mentioned a year that you talked to your friends, you're going to stay in Thailand for a year.
Yeah.
But I read your bio online. You ran out of money in the first month.
3 months, 3 or 4
Okay.
months, yeah.
So then after you ran out of money, a lot of people would make the decision to go back, right?
Yes.
Because that's the reasonable thing to do. But you decided, somehow maybe I can stay here.
Yeah.
So how does that come to be the decision?
I think looking back, because we can only rely upon our memory often, I think looking back, when I got to Thailand, it was almost like I was a flower. And when I got to Thailand, I completely bloomed, opened up. I loved the weather, I loved the food, I loved the people, I loved the beaches, I loved the mountains, I loved the trekking, I loved everything that I saw. And I've now had this for 3 months or 4 months. So I came in September, the money ran out in December, so September, October, November. It was 3 or 4 months. And part of that, I think I was in my beach hut in Lamai Beach in Koh Samui. And this is before the tourists. This is just really travellers. So it's backpacks and you come over on the boat. There was only 2 planes a day going into Samui Airport, it's brand new. And so I'd had something like 10 weeks in this beach hut where you wake up at the beginning of every day and you've got 3 problems every day in life. What am I going to choose for breakfast? What am I going to choose for lunch? And what am I going to choose for dinner? And then the rest of the day was spent with travel friends, talking, sharing stories, enjoying the beach life, playing cards, eating this glorious food. And every single day, I'd never had an experience like this in my life. And another thing that definitely I know is that when I came to Thailand, I felt a real sense of freedom. Now, I grew up in England and we're told, well, freedom of speech, democracy, freedom, blah, blah, blah. And so you just take it for granted. You don't have any alternative reference point. But when I got to Thailand, I suddenly realized what freedom meant because I had found it. And then I've written a lot about it since, freedom. Freedom to me is that thing that every human being is searching for without knowing that they're necessarily searching for it and without even knowing what it is when they might find it. But I had found it. And I think that was the big thing. The freedom was in the country, the weather, waking up every day for 10 weeks on a beach hut without having to go to work, nothing to think about, nothing to worry about, not married, no kids, complete total freedom. And in great part it was the Thailand, it was the location where I was that gave me that sense of freedom. And so I think that's why I was desperate, because I do remember being absolutely desperate not to go back to England at that time.
The reference point was this economic concession back in England, and also the experience that the personal experience that you had in these places in Thailand. Many people do find that kind of freedom when they come to Thailand. But how do you distinguish freedom from, let's say, how do you know that's real freedom? That's not hedonism. Because many people coming to Thailand, they found something else, right? They found, all of their let's say, the darkest desires satisfied in very weird but easy ways, right? So how do you know that's true freedom?
Well, I don't know if I did know, but I do know that then my natural instinct and something I was born to do is to reflect upon life. And I'm a born learner. I'm a bookworm. I read hundreds of books when I was a kid. I loved learning. I did very well at school. And so what happened was, and I do remember this, that, okay, so I lived in England and I had holidays abroad. So I had some external reference points. You know, I'd been to Africa 6 times. I've been to America, Canada, Bahrain, Middle East. So I did have some kind of reference point before. But when I got here, I started to reflect. Oh no, so that's it. So when in England, I was living in my box of England, my cultural and societal box, and this is the way we live life, and this is the way we do it. And there's there's lots of boundaries and lots of rules. So then, when I left England, I was outside that box. Now I was in Thailand, and when I was here, there were very few Farang or foreigners. So I was pretty much the only white face around, and with my teacher friends. And you quickly realise, one example. We might be in a restaurant. We could talk in English and nobody knew what we were talking about. Freedom. We can say what we want. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to plot to kill people, but we were. So what this meant was that I didn't feel that sense to temper my behaviour and my speech. What will people think of me? If I say this, people will judge me negatively, so I won't say that. So my behaviour and my speech became liberated from the worry that everybody has of what other people will think about them. So it wasn't the hedonistic kind of freedom. It was. I noticed that the freedom was that I could pretty much do what I wanted to do and say what I wanted to say, so long as I didn't cause anybody any problems. Because most of the Thai people didn't have a clue what I was talking about because of the language. And so that was a real sense of freedom. So it wasn't the freedom to do things so much as the freedom from a burden that everybody carries, which is the worry of what other people will think about you if you say or do this. Do you know what I mean when I'm saying that?
Yes.
Because I think that's international, is that we grow up and we are worried about what people think about us. We're social creatures. We don't want to be outcasts. We don't want the group to reject us. So we have to live according to the group's rules.
My impression about Britain before I went to Britain was pretty much like, let's say, the weaker version of America, which is whatever you want to do, right? It's the American dream, weaker version America, something like that. But when I went to England, I started to realize that England is very traditional in the way, for example, that the students would spend a lot of time in the libraries, pretty much like the Chinese. I thought, they were going to parties, but they're not going to parties. They're in the libraries. They finish their work. Their parents have expectations for them. And you have to get into this particular kind of job. That most of the students, have this very family-centered life, which is very different from my, let's say, impression of Britain before going there. So I kind of understand, the concept that you talked about, which is the social expectation, right? The society imposes something to you. And with that as a reference point, and also with the economic downturn, I believe, that this experience gave you something, and that something is positive because, like you said, you're rooted in this learning and this experience as you travel to different places, right? Now, you also mentioned that in the 1990s, you could speak English without people knowing what you were talking about. So you found a job teaching people English, right? Thai economy started to boom in the 1980s and 1990s. So what was the English teaching profession or the English speaking scene in Bangkok back in the 1990s? And how did you, funny thing is you mentioned that you tried to convince this guy to teach, to give you this position as an English teacher.
Yeah.
Does it mean that they didn't have that position for foreigners, but you somehow convinced him? Like, what happened?
No. Would you like me to tell you how I got the job?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, interesting what you said. It's very true. And the scene at the beginning of the 90s was very much the 80s had come into the early 90s, because this is the last period of time in Earth before the internet. So we were relatively unconnected. So yeah, I mean, the first day I went looking for the job, it was a failure, and it was boiling hot in Bangkok. And
Just like today.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't used to it then.
Yeah.
But at the bottom of my rucksack, I had the tie, the pair of trousers, and the crumpled shirt that had been there since the beginning. And then the girl at the guest house ironed and cleaned them for me, which was great. And I got on an aircon bus, pitched into Bangkok, went to 2 different schools that I found. One said, "Have you got a degree?" And this is probably a secret, but never mind. And I said no, and they said, well, basically goodbye. So,
Yeah.
I need a degree.
Yeah.
Because at that time, many people in England never took a degree. It wasn't seen as really important to get
Yes,
ahead.
I understand that. Yeah.
And I wanted out of education as quickly as possible. And then the other one didn't have a job. So I went back to the guest house feeling demoralised. And my 2 Australian friends at the time said, no, go back again tomorrow. You've got to go back, do it. Because they obviously knew that how desperate I was. How motivated I was to get a job. Second day, I was back in the big city, in the big mango, treading the streets, and I had my list, and I thought, well, this one, 6 branches, it says. So I thought, I've got to find this one, because if this has got 6 branches. So I was looking for it, and then I turned the corner, because there's no Google Maps. You've just got to roughly work out where you're going. And suddenly I saw 3 big red and white letters, ECC. That's the one. And as I'm walking towards the branch, thinking, I found it, I saw 3 or 4 young people like me, white faces, with tie and shirts, and I thought, teachers, right? If they can get the job, so can I. And I'd met somebody who gave me some encouragement and said, look, if you really want the job, you'll get it. So that was in the back of my head. Walked in, total relief from the heat, aircon, looked up, and there's the desk. It's a big lobby, and behind the desk were 4 or 5 of the most beautiful girls that you could think about. And they were looking up at me, and I'm going, "Oh, what have I walked into?" Anyway, I sat down, and basically they gave me an application form. So I filled in the form, and then it said degree. So I thought, well, what do I put here? So okay, BA English. That'll do. So filled in the form. Next form, grammar test. Present perfect. What's that? Trying to remember my French and Latin classes, and then I remembered BA in English, and I can't do the grammar. I've blown it. Anyway, I filled out the form, did the best as I could, waited. And so I was waiting. It was lovely and cool. I'd cooled down, but then my Aries impatience was starting to kick in. I think I'd been waiting well over half an hour. Anyway, as I was perhaps thinking of giving up, one of the girls came along, led me upstairs, sat me outside, big, solid, mahogany, oak, teak door, big brass plate, managing director. We've got the interview. And I don't remember being nervous. I just remember being determined. You know, I've got upstairs. This seemed like a good move for me.
That's right.
Door opened, a fairly sort of short, happy, smiling kind of Thai man bid me into his office, huge office, massive wooden table, all opulence and money and so on. And then on the floor, I saw a London A to Z map. Now, did you see that when you were in London?
Is it the postcodes or something?
No, it's a map that's got every single street of London in it, and on different pages. So if you're in this area of London, you open up and you've got the full street map. So it's just it, and the London taxi drivers would study it.
That's interesting.
So it's a famous map in London. So I saw it on the floor, and as I sat down, he said hello, and I said, "Oh, I see you've been to London," and he says, "Fine city, beautiful place," and he starts telling me his stories of being in London, and I'm just listening. And then at the end of that, he says, "Right, well, I'll take you through to David now." Thought, that's an easy interview. He's just listened to him talking about London. Went through to David. David was an Englishman, glasses, behind a desk. Hello, Philip. We were talking to him. Turns out he was from Bolton, very near where I was living in Manchester. So we chatted some. Anyway, I got on with him, and then he finally said, "Have you got any experience?" And somebody had told me what to say. So I said, "Oh, not really, David, but I did teach some local villagers in Spain once." And he goes, "Just how I started." I thought, this must be a code word or something. And then he said the immortal words, "When can you start?" So I sort of pretended that I wasn't desperate. So like get the diary. "Well, I can't quite make tomorrow, Dave. Day after?" And he said, "Yes." And so that was it.
Yeah.
And then I reported for duty and the branch that I was assigned was in the northern suburbs, so it was well away from any tourist area. So it really was like proper Thailand for me, which is what I wanted. And that was the beginning. And then, of course, my first big teaching was I had a 3-hour class on a Saturday morning, a 3-hour class on Saturday afternoon. I had 3 students in the first class, and then about 10 students in the second class. And that was the rest of my life began that day, I guess.
So you mentioned that starting from there, you find your calling. Now, you didn't have any experience. You lack, I would say, expertise now that you consider with all of your credentials that you have, that probably you were not a very good teacher at the beginning, but you find your calling on that particular day. So, like, what exactly is it? Like, how does it happen?
Well, if somebody was listening to me and they were thinking that they would like to take the same path as I did, the thing that got me over the line, the thing that got me into the job and made me get where I am today was my total enthusiasm for the job. But there's another thing. My head teacher was a Canadian chap called Glenn, and he welcomed me with open arms and took me around the school and showed me the ropes. And look, this is the teaching book. The left-hand side is the teacher's page, this is the student's page. And then he talked to me, and then he said to me, Thai students, meaning the adults, they want 2 things. They want to practice speaking English, and they want fun. And I just took that on board. I said, okay, that'll do for me. And then I just learned and learned and learned. I asked the other teachers what games, and I quickly found out that games were integral to the teaching process. So I developed a bank of games and movement in the classroom. And it must be said, it must be borne in mind that the students would be in a U shape, and I'd be at the front. So it wasn't your rows and columns.
That's right.
And so I think I just leapt into the job, and I learned it as quickly as I could. And my whole emphasis was, how am I going to get them to speak? Make sure they have fun. And because they were having fun, I was having fun. And so it just snowballed from there. So I think that, because a lot of teachers come here and they start the same way as I do. Maybe they did the certificate for 4 weeks before, but still haven't taught. I hadn't even done that. But I think, you've got to enjoy that job. You've got to enjoy that job. And if you do, then you can go as far as you want, which is what I did do.
It is your, let's say, enthusiasm, which is quite different from, let's say, someone who's here, who wants to stay here and only want to find a job because they can secure a visa.
Right.
So it has some function, but the teaching is not something that they really want. So again, I think, what exactly is that calling that you feel like, back then? Like you feel this is, because you mentioned that this is what I'm going to do for my life, right? So like, what exactly is it? Like, how did you feel it?
I think it comes back to fun and freedom. I really do, because I've always wanted to enjoy life, and I had trouble when I was young, and I think that an integral part of having fun and freedom is being a learner. And when I became the teacher, of course I didn't know how to teach. So what have I got to do? I've got to learn how to teach. So as I'm teaching the students who are learning by doing, learning to improve their communicative ability in spoken English, I'm learning how to get them to do that better. So I'm, as a teacher, so if I had 1,000 hours of teaching classroom practice, I had 1,000 hours of learning practice for me as well. So, and then of course, the students, they wanted to be with you, and I was the Englishman. And why are you here? Why aren't you in the rich country of England? Why are you in our country? And I said, well, there's so many good things about your country. I love being here. And that was the big thing. I wasn't just enthusiastic about the job. I came into that job with a big enthusiasm for living in Thailand. So that propelled me into the classroom, and the classroom just doubled down on that. So, then suddenly the students are, we're going out for dinner together, and they're choosing all these beautiful foods. And then they're saying, well, should we go out for a day? Oh, we're not working on Saturday, let's go out for a day. So they took me out to, Hua Hin, local, places nearby Bangkok, and we go out for days out. Then we started going out for long weekends. So I was engaging and connecting with Thai people, and I found them to be such wonderful people that I, everything in my life, in my work and my own home life and everything, which was very simple, one-room apartment, everything was free. Everything felt freedom and fun, and I just simply enjoyed every moment of life. And I can remember laying down in my apartment one evening after work, and there was 2 English language radio stations at the time, and I was listening to one of them, and I had my tape cassettes. I didn't have any television. I didn't have any mod cons whatsoever, and I remember thinking, I'm never bored. Boredom had left, and because in England you could get bored.
That's right.
And not because it's England, but because of the way of life and the culture and
also the weather.
And the weather and everything. But it suddenly occurred to me that in my new life, I was never bored. And quite often I might teach in the morning and then nothing till the evening. So you soon learned where all the swimming pools were. So you get on a bus for 10 minutes, go down the road, walk down a soi, and there's this big swimming pool there. So you can go swimming, good exercise, bit of sun tanning, and eat the glorious food for lunch, get back, do your teaching work. And then another friend came, and we would play snooker every week. And so it was just, I had 10 years of heaven.
Seems to me that, so obviously you have this profound curiosity when you talked about, I'm a teacher, but I'm also a learner. When I teach, I also learn. We actually, I think, learned about this, this kind of principle in pedagogy classes or whatever, right?
Yes.
But for most people, it's just talk. For most teachers, it's just talk.
You
right?
mean the
Because
teachers are talking?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, like, I'm a teacher. How can I be a learner? I'm teaching you something, right? That's the attitude of most of the teachers.
It is.
But this curiosity probably also is from your openness, trade openness, perhaps, like you said, you were born with that. Also, perhaps enhanced by your father's, giving you the tickets, right? Traveling the world. So I wonder, do you feel like, that Thailand, looking back to the first 10 years, do you feel like Thailand was more like a challenge, like a puzzle, it kind of fulfilled your curiosity in a way? But it just so happens that it's a fun puzzle. It's not one of the boring puzzles, because you mentioned boring, right? So it's not boring anymore. It's fun, but it's like a puzzle. It satisfies your curiosity. You start to look for, to understand more and more and more, but there's so many unanswered questions. Do you feel like that?
I'm not sure, but certain events come into your life that then define the next portion of your life. And I was having total fun for 3 years, and then they made me the senior teacher of my branch, and I lasted about 8 months because the fun had been broken, because now I had to answer to the big boss, and I wasn't just coming in and teaching and working with my students. Now I had to, so that wasn't a success really. And then shortly afterwards, and in taking that job, they said, well, you have to do the 4-week certificate course, which I then loved, because that really taught me that, I've been teaching for 2 or 3 years, and now I was formally learning how to teach. But you're right about the teaching, thinking I have to talk. I had the opposite view. My head teacher told me they want to practice speaking English. So all the time I'm speaking, they're not. So my view was they need to speak. So what this did, I think, Larry, was that they loved being in my classroom, which is hardly conducive to me feeling sad. So they, by virtue of them loving being in my classroom, and that was my whole purpose, was I want them to enjoy the lesson so much that at the end of it, they're looking forward to the next one. And so that's what was going on. So, and then I did my certificate course, and then I really advanced after that, because now I suddenly, there's a system to what I'm doing. But in terms of how life unfolded, I didn't have any puzzle to solve, and I wasn't looking for answers. I was just enjoying the moment. But then, in 1994, one of my fellow teachers from Australia gave me a John Pilger book to read. And John Pilger was an investigative journalist who asked all the difficult questions and was very courageous. And he was writing about countries around the world and crimes of empire, let's just put it that way, and war and bloodshed and all unnecessary suffering and injustice and corruption and all of that palaver. And I was very much interested in politics when I was in England, because I wanted to understand it. So I think I've always been driven by a curiosity to understand life. And so that's why I was interested in politics, because it drives life. But that had gone on the back burner when I was having this tremendous fun for 3 or 4 years. And then in 94, so we're 3 or 4 years into the journey, I read these books and I started feeling myself filled with rage. In my personal heaven, I was reading about these things and I would feel intense anger and at what was going on in our world, and in part from my own country. And I understood now. I sort of knew something was wrong when I lived in England, but now suddenly, and a quick mention to the Bangkok Post and the Nation at the time, they were outstanding newspapers, but they were independent. I don't know if they are now, but so this changed. I think everything that I am now actually can be traced back to that book. So for 3 years I had your kind of total fun journey, but then when I read these books I was getting angry, and then after a year or so, and I now had a new job which was paying very well and it gave me lots of holidays, but I read these books and suddenly one day it clicked. Hang on, I'm feeling angry, but the people that I'm reading about, the crimes continue. My anger's only damaging me. I need to find an answer. And that's when I went into the bookshops, because as you know, we're in a Buddhist country, so there was no shortage of Buddhism and all kinds of philosophical, spiritual kind of books. So I started reading the books, and I picked up one book which remains in me today. But so I embarked upon, now my natural curiosity for life, I think it had an outlet. Now it had something to grab onto, and now I perhaps began a path without realizing it at the time, and I began my spiritual journey to stop feeling angry, and it worked because I started to understand who I was. I think I should tell you the story when I was in a taxi in 98 kind of time. It's in my book. I was in a taxi after work, me and 2 friends. We'd finished teaching downtown school, 9 o'clock, and we had an hour to get back. And normally we'd all be talking philosophy, politics, teaching, all the stuff that we talked about, because we talked a lot of shop, because we all loved teaching. We were all good at teaching, and we all loved it because they were very good quality school. And on this journey, I was quiet. I wasn't talking. I could still see myself in the taxi, and I wasn't talking. And I heard the other 2 talking, my 2 friends, Rob and Nick. And then there was a little gap, and I suddenly said to them, Rob, Nick, I've got voices in my head. And in England, that means you've gone insane, you've gone loopy, you've gone bananas, you've gone mad. So they laughed, but that was when I suddenly realized that this mind is not what we think it is. And then my journey began from there, and that was the beginning, that was the seed for writing my book, and so on. So I think that, to answer your question, when I got to Thailand, it was just, this is a beautiful journey, let's just be on the journey. And then pain through anger motivated me to learn more, but outside of the teaching, I was still learning about the teaching, and then I did my diploma before the masters as well, which was outstanding. So I was learning in every facet of my life. I was learning how to be a better teacher all the time. I was learning on the job in the classroom. I was learning from reading the books, and now I was learning from spiritual books and taking long weekends off to Hua Hin to sit on the beach and just try and work it all out. So reflecting, probably meditating without knowing that's what I was doing at the time.
So so you mentioned something very interesting, which is that you're haunted by this question, right? That you want the answer for this question. This question is an idea. It's an idea you read from a book. You might say that it's pretty distant from your reality, right? Yes. For many people, that's just somebody else's problem. You know, they're busy with their job. They're working in their own contexts. So I think, have you thought about why you're possessed by this idea? And the second thing is, you mentioned that you went to this bookshop, and then you started looking for books to answer your question. That's also very interesting, because most of the answers that now we ask Google, right? Or yes, we ask AI. But you went to this bookstore to try to find out the answer. And then the books that you looked into, I don't know if you look into all kinds of books, but definitely you looked into spiritual yes, books, right? So why did you go for spiritual books? Why do you think, that those books might have answers for your question?
Well, because by now I've had 5, 6, 7 years living in Thailand, and obviously the Buddhism had reflected on me and rubbed off on me. I've spent a lot of time with my Thai students and taxi drivers and talking to girls in the bars downtown. So I had talked to and got to know probably thousands, hundreds and hundreds of Thai people of all backgrounds, all different ages, and I had come to learn their ways, and I had come to see the difference in approach to life between the Thai person and the British person. So I had come to understand the Thai psyche compared to the British psyche. So clearly all of that I had imbibed, acquired in me as a body of understanding. So I imagine that when I went to get the books, it was like, well, okay, instead of just being with Buddhist people, I'm now going to study it. And it wasn't just Buddhism, but also, I used to read the newspaper a lot, and every weekend I had to buy the Bangkok Post Saturday and Sunday, and they had such good writers in there. There was one chap called Imtiaz Iqbal, and he had a column called Soul Searching. So he was reflecting on matters of life. So I had already been reading these kinds of things, and pamphlets and leaflets and all kinds of things had come my way because I'm a reader. So it was obviously a natural thing to go into the bookshops and get books on. But the first book I got was called A Treatise in Revolutionary Psychology, and it was written by somebody called Samael on War. Not sure where he comes from, maybe Mexican, and he was a student of Gnosis, Gnosis, which is, I think, the understanding of knowledge, life knowledge. And so whether I was looking for an answer to solve my anger issues, but then the reading started turning me inwards. Well, the questions that I think every human being wants to know the answer to, which is, who am I and why am I here? But something I haven't mentioned yet, I had a lot of time and space in my life. I was still single. I had lots of time and space to read books, to sit down, I had lots of holidays, like in my job for 5 years at the university there, I had about 16 weeks holiday a year. So I had lots of time and space to pursue those questions. And I think every human being, deep inside them, wants to know, well, who am I and why am I here? And I have observed most definitely that the happiest human beings are the ones who have some kind of purpose or meaning in their life. They might just go to church every Sunday and have a boring job for 6 days, but they've got that Sunday every week, or they love fishing, or they love gardening, or they make this or whatever. And those human beings are more content and happier because they've got this meaning. So while I was interested in the meaning of life, I discovered that the real meaning was in life. So I think that while I'm not sure that I would set out with that specific question, but when I pursued the spiritual books, that question very quickly became central to my life, yes.
I think we can focus on that later, but I have a question because you mentioned that you got the chance to talk to different people.
Yes.
You mentioned that you've been talking to people, probably thousands of Thai people, local people from different perspectives. Now, we see this, first there's a lot of foreigners here in this country, and they all carry their own perspectives from their country. And we can sometimes see these perspectives on forums, Facebook posts and whatever. A lot of them are, let's say, complaints about Thainess or Thailand from their perspective. Now, you obviously felt it necessary to talk to the people to understand them. But this is not what everybody does. So how did you, I understand you're curious, but even with the curiosity, you might carry your boxes, right? So how did you, by talking to these people and by understanding them, how did you get this, let's say, multicultural perspective? And you understand this is a different way of life from the British way of life, but this doesn't mean that this is bad. It doesn't mean that I have to complain about this kind of life. So how did you get there?
Well, the Thai way of life suited me much more than the British way of life, right from the beginning. I used to think of something like, well, if you could get the perfect life, then it would be 80% Thai and 20% British. But knowing you couldn't get the perfect life. Let's remember that when you have fun, you don't have any other motivation. When you're getting fun, I think all other motivations and driving forces take a second place or a distant fifth. You're having fun. So, I got in taxis, therefore I was exposed to taxi drivers. And they all wanted to, and it was great practice for my Thai language. Oh, and maybe I should say this, I started learning the Thai language right from the first day. And anybody that comes to this country to live, or anybody that emigrates or migrates to another country, they really should at least try and learn the language. There's too many people, and most of the complainers I noticed at that time, because they were there before the internet days, I met some, nearly always they hadn't learned the language. So I was meeting all these people, practicing learning Thai at the same time. And but I just had the opportunity. I was working with lots of them. I got to the point where I was earning good money, so I always jumped in a taxi. So I talked to the taxi drivers, and they told me about their life, and some of them would speak English, and then they wanted to tell me about their life. And wherever I've gone, Larry, for whatever reason, you'd have to ask other people, people seem to open up to me. They tell me about their life, even though I've never met them before. And I keep my counsel, but they somehow seem to realise that I'm not going to go and broadcast what they tell me. But and also my mum was a people person. She loved people. And although I was a bit shy in England, I love meeting people, and I love the stories, and I love the travel stories, and the Thai people. I just really loved Thai culture, and I had pretty much zero complaints about life. And then when I might get a bit bored with something, I remember one time, they didn't do queues. So I might be waiting in a shop, faithfully queuing like an Englishman, because that's what we do in England. And somebody would just come into the shop and go straight to the front, and I'd be burning inside. It's like, whoa! But I wouldn't say anything because you didn't make a scene. So that I was taking on the Thai cultural traits. And while you might be angry at that point, you're making for a better life overall by not creating a confrontation every time something doesn't go your way. So I acculturate culturalized myself naturally and easily, and I learned the language, and I had the opportunity to meet so many Thai people, because many expats come here, or expats or whoever, if they're not teaching, they're not really meeting many Thai people. And one of the complaints people do have is, I can't get any Thai friends, don't know how to get Thai friends. I always had all my students. So my job and my work and my life situation, perhaps my approach to life, just allowed me to meet all the Thai people. And I loved the country right from the day one. So I was just, it was almost as if I was made to be here.
So how was your experience of having the master's degree from King's College? Obviously, you upped your game, right? Not upped your game. You have your master's degree now. So coming back, you were given this position as an important position at the Pai University for this master's program. How does it facilitate this spiritual experience that you have in Thailand in some way? Of course, it helps with your work, right? You have a better job. It's much more challenging. So kind of you can find meaning in this job itself. But I think you have this soul searching thing to do at the moment, right? So, but you made a practical decision to have this master's degree, and you have the degree, and then you have this very good job. Does it help with the soul searching?
It did, but there was an important 2 years. When I finished the degree in London, I came back in October 2001, and then 4 or 5 months later I moved up to live in Chiang Mai, and I had 2 years of not working. For various reasons, things happened. So I had 2 years of not working before I got the job at PIAP. In that 2 years, when I went back to study, my spiritual investigations were completely put on hold because the studies took up all the time. But now I had all the time and space, and I was in Chiang Mai, which was a sensational place to live.
It is, yeah.
And this was in 2002, and I called it an adventure playground surrounded by a natural wonderland. And then early on I met a friend who'd just come from 6 months at an ashram in India, and he became a good friend. I met him during the World Cup at the time, during South Korea. It's 2002, summertime. And we were going to go out for a night, so I went round to his apartment to meet him. And as he was getting ready, I saw a book on his table. And as I do, I picked up the book, opened it randomly, and read the page. And if the page would be good, I'd then go to page 1. And if page 1 was good, it's a book I'm interested in. And I opened up the book, and it was another one of those life-defining moments. And it was by Osho. And anyway, 2 days later, I went to the local second-hand bookshop, and a couple of hours later, I walked out with 18 Osho books. 12 were part of a series, like a food for thought every day. But so Osho was the man that bridged me from my 10 years in Bangkok and my studies in London into the life that I've now lived in Chiang Mai, which is where all my spiritual growth and evolution took place. But it was very much catalyzed by reading all the Osho books. And that came after the studies for the degree that you know. So that degree was English language teaching and crucially applied linguistics. And that's when I learned about the language. That's when I really learned how language is used to liberate us and to enslave us. The subconscious, the conscious. So when I added my spiritual journey with what I'd learned about the language, then it was now time to get a job. And fortuitously, I managed to get the job at PIAP because they wanted to get hold of me, but their servers went down. They lost all their email records. But the Scottish chap, who was the head of department at the time, remembered my email address because it was Konjai Yen, which is patient man.
It's interesting.
And he learned Thai and so on. So because he remembered my email address, he got hold of me. Anyway, I got the job, and now again, I have to teach 6 hours a week. That's my teaching load. not 20. And okay, the university were always wanting the teachers to do their research and so on, but I was researching life, I was researching spirituality, I was researching all of, how life works. So, so I had all the time to do that. And I had lots of travel. Then I met my wife and we traveled to various countries, and then I started branching out in Asia, going to Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam. So I traveled a lot more, and I was going to Australia a lot. So all the travel, all the English teaching, and now teaching English teachers, not per se how to teach, but how they should learn, which is then how you teach. Because if you know how to learn, you become a much more successful teacher. So it all came together, and that job was my most challenging job, not in terms of it being difficult, but in terms of pushing me in my own understanding of life. So it all came together, and then the back pain I got now, the back pain came in 2008.
Nice.
And then that got solved when I saw an Ayurvedic alternative healing, and then the book got started, because I'd been working on the mind and the soul for years, but I'd never paid attention to the physical health, the physical body. And I just drank as much beer as I wanted and did this and did that. And now when I learned it, and now suddenly I'm researching food and health and illness and sickness and healthcare, thousands of hours, because I'm a researcher, I'm teaching teachers how to do research, so it's part of my job. So now the university want me to get my PhD, and I just want to learn about every aspect of life. And then that's when I knew that I had to write the book, because that was the missing part, because you've got your mind, body and soul. And I'd been investigating the mind and soul for years, and now I was looking into the body. So that job was brilliant for me, but it was also brilliant because I was now teaching lots of English teachers, and this was high-powered stuff. For them and for me, and I loved it.
So you mentioned about the book. Is it an answer, or is it an attempt to answer something?
No, it's the full answer. It's for readers to find their own answers. You see, you've got, historically we've had all these gurus and these magic pills. Just take this pill and life will be perfect, or listen to the guru and he'll tell you what to do. And you mentioned earlier about God, how maybe humankind has killed God, what's replaced God. We are externalized. We look out there for all the answers, but the answer's in us. So my book must take the reader on a path of self-inquiry. So I can't tell them what's true for them, but I can do two things. I can guide them onto their path so they can ask their own questions and find their own answers, and I can share what I've learned, which in part is what I've been doing, talking to you now.
That's right.
So that's the makeup of the book. It's like, and it's got lots of tasks in there for the readers, which is how I teach in the classroom. It's the best I could do for a book. So the book, it is the answer for the reader, but it's because the reader will find their own answer. But ultimately speaking, truth to me is my truth, and it's your truth. So whatever your life is, that's your truth, and it doesn't matter whether it's an illusion or fake, it's your truth. But ultimately speaking, if people go down the same path of investigations and self-inquiry, they will arrive at very similar answers, which then turns out to be what we might call universal truths and understandings for the human being. So it's my job in that book, and also to write in a language that the taxi driver can access, as well as the academic. And perhaps the academic needs to access it more than the taxi driver. So the book is my effort to share my answer and guide people to find their own, which, according to my understanding, is likely to be the same as mine, but you've got to do it yourself.
I think, listening to you, I have 1,000, things to ask, because there are so many different points, But one of them, I think, is Carl Rogers, the American psychologist, talks
Yeah.
about this relationship to build with the, let's say, patients, right? The idea that you can't tell them the answers, then they have to find out the answer themselves.
Yes.
And another point I think is the one that you just mentioned, that Nietzsche famously remarked that God is dead and we killed God, and what is going to replace God? So I wonder, the path that you take seems to be looking for the spiritual structure in your psyche. And then you mentioned this psyche, this structure is universal, right? Somehow universal. I don't know how you define that, but I think the question is, do you see that you're searching for this? Obviously, you found your answer here in Thailand, and perhaps in Buddhism, I don't know, or your own brand of spirituality. But do you see this related to perhaps a lack of symbolism, a lack of religious symbolism in England, that somehow Christian values are not considered to be the ultimate value, that you're not educated or you're not rooted in Christianity anymore, that you have this lack of exposure to spirituality? Do you see something like that? Because Carl Jung mentioned that the Eastern symbols, right, the Western people, they kind of got into the stage of that Christianity is no longer the most important symbols. So they start looking for symbols in the East. And the East gives them meaning because symbols are meaning to Carl Jung. So do you see that your spiritual development as a lack of Western symbolism or Christianity?
I don't think I've really seen it that way. It's interesting when you say that in the West they then look for Eastern symbology to help them, and it might be that Eastern people look West, because lots of people in the global South, their dream is to go and live in free America. So it's interesting that perhaps Eastern people are looking for Western answers, and maybe Western people are looking for Eastern answers, and perhaps the answer is that we shouldn't have West and East split. We need to join them, and this is the spirituality that I understand. So if you've got Christianity, and then you've got Islam, and then you've got Judaism, and then you've got Buddhism, and well, not Buddhism necessarily, but you've got these different religions. They're all saying, follow me, but perhaps it has been necessary for God to be disappeared, because then you find yourself, and then it turns out that that is the answer. So we're always looking outside of ourselves. We are in the classroom, we are brought up to comply with authority, to listen to the authority, to follow the rules, but also to learn from the external authority. So science is the external authority, the government is the external authority, the parent is the external authority for the kid, men are the external authority for women. You know, traditionally speaking, there's always been this hierarchical structure to society, which is based on somebody assuming greater power because of their position and role, and other people giving them that position. So if you're the parent, you will subconsciously assume the position of authority over your kids, but you will give that authority to science and to the government. So when are we responsible for ourselves? So what's happened is, in my view, so for example, we had science and religion were split. Now Krishnamurti and Osho are very clear that we have to put them back together again. So maybe we split things conceptually to get a better understanding, and that's fine, and that's how the logical brain works. But if we forget to put them back together again, we're not going to get the understanding we need. So we can put it into parts to understand the parts, you have to put it back into the whole again. So if I'm in conflict with another person, I carry the energy of conflict in me. So I'm damaging myself by being in conflict with another person. Same with two countries. If one country is in conflict with another country, they are carrying that conflict energy, so everybody's losing. So it's double loser. So if I can create a harmony within myself, so that if I disagree with you, or if we somehow have a problem, it isn't going to be a problem, because we'll just say, well, why do you think that, Larry? Oh, okay, well, that's your background. So we're coming from a position of wanting to be in harmony, so conflict it finds it very difficult to take root and take hold in the person who desires harmony and understands that we are the living whole. Yet some spiritual people will say we are just one, but in my view we are the separate and we are the whole. So I call us interconnected individuals. So we're individuals, but we're interconnected. So that sums it up, because we're both a unique person with our own preferences and interests and experiences and talents, and yet we are connected, because if I can make my students happy, I'm happy. If they are sad, then I'm going to lose out. So I think that's at the guts of the spiritual understanding that I've got. But now, having backgrounded that, I've forgotten what your question was.
Right. I forgot my question either. So what you said was very interesting, was fascinating, because Jung was also talking about this integration of the ego, or actually he used the word the self, which
Yes.
means the individuals, the integration that is important. And this process, he used a very interesting word that is very similar to the word that you used, individuation.
Right.
He called it. So I think, the thing that you found out through your experience, your reading, your thinking, your experience is actually quite fascinating, because it aligns pretty well with a lot of, let's say, literature, psychology literature, whatever, Now, given what you talked about, what is your definition of God? When you say God, what do you mean by that?
It's language, isn't it?
Yeah.
God, the problem with God, poor chap, is that he comes with a lot of connotational baggage. People, I grew up, he's a big man with a big beard sitting in a chair up in the sky somewhere. And so, but God to me, I like the term the divine cosmic operator, or universal intelligence, or cosmic consciousness, life itself, the manifestation and the unfolding of life, the cycle of life. So
on multiple levels, right?
On every single interconnected level. Because wherever we see a part, and we're human beings, so we have the brain and capacity to focus on the part, but that part is the whole. So God is the whole. So in effect, when we step back from this external authority knows best, and we always give into external authority based on your position or role in life, and you develop your own inner authority, which is suppressed in every single one of us through the school systems that we have, because that's the way humanity's gone. And I happen to think there's no blame. It's just, I think this is just our evolutionary stepping stones, because the human being is just a total miracle. I mean, what this mind can do. So I think that the parts and the whole are interchangeable, and they come together. And when I've lost track again, because this is such a big topic, and it's so important for us to not just to understand, but to try and understand, because this is the roots of all our suffering, is when we think that we're alone. So, we are psychologically worried about being rejected by the group, and it happens a lot. There's divorces very high, and group and friends, and we see in social media there's so much nastiness and so on. We've got several wars going on now, so humanity still hasn't solved its problems, and it's because of this external authority dichotomy. We need to access our inner authority, which then introduces us to our inner essence, which is our heart-based living. So now, because we're all head-based, and now we can open up the heart, and then when the heart is open, now the heart is now connected with the mind as one, and through that, life is a different journey.
I think in our previous conversation, you were kind of critical to gurus. Now, this area of earth,
Critical to.
gurus, different kinds of religious gurus, right?
Okay.
So this area, South Asia, Southeastern Asia, are not short of people who claim to be gurus, right?
Oh, yes.
So I wonder, how do you see yourself different from them?
Well, firstly, I don't want to be criticizing or critical of anybody, because everybody is a point of learning for us. Even the false gurus and the false prophets. It's just that history has many gurus, false prophets, charlatans, snake oil salesmen, people who will steal your money. History's always been full of that. For me, I certainly have nothing to do with being any kind of guru. I was put in that position when I first started teaching English, because my students, I was the man from England. I was
Right.
speak well Englishman translated, but actually the gentleman, James Bond. They almost saw me as James Bond. Not that I anything look like him. But, so I then, without knowing what I was doing, I divested myself and got rid of that authority. And I did stupid things, brought myself down, because I could see that if they were too formal with me, they weren't going to speak. They were going to be shy, worried about making mistakes, and they wouldn't learn how to speak. So I got rid of the authority they were giving me and earned it myself by my actions and by my teaching and by what I did. And that's what I call inner authority in action, as opposed to external authority. Now, there is many gurus who and you know them because they want you to become your own guru. So I think, to answer your question, perhaps I am my own guru. But I'm not a guru for anybody else, but I am a point of reference, and I willingly put myself out there and my life's journey and my understandings for people to use in their own journey. Because that's how we learn from each other, not just through the books, and not just, well, he's the scientist, so he's the expert there, and he's the politician, so he's the expert there. And where have our experts brought us? Where, our humankind is in a bit of a problem at the moment. So we have to become our own expert. We have to become our own guru. But that's not to deny the role of scientists and so on. It's just that we have to stop suppressing ourselves. We have to unsuppress ourselves, and we were made that way in our school and upbringing. So I think that human nurture has been damaging humanity and suppressing human nature. We need upbringing and education where our nurture process complements our nature. So that, if I have a role to play, it's not as a guru, it's to bring that message through to people, but to help them find it themselves by the way that I teach in the classroom, which is to get them talking, not for me to talk. Once they've done all the talking and who's God and why are here, who are you, why are we here, and they all talk together in small groups, then I'll tell them my thoughts. But I never tell them what I think before they've thought for themselves. And then when they have discussed things for themselves, they always want to know what I think. So that to me is how it works.
We usually project our subconscious into things that we find beautiful.
Yes.
So obviously, this is the estate that you're building, spent many years building. Would you say that this is an ideal house that instills some of the philosophy, some of the religiosity that you kind of talked about in this setting? Rogers also talks about that the setting is pretty important for certain healing to happen. So this is a pretty remote place, but it's very close to nature. It has beautiful scenes, delicious food. So what do you see this project that you're working on?
Well, it's becoming a project as it unfolds, really. Initially it was because my wife wanted it, and we had our dreams, and she had her dreams, and it was more for her dreams at the beginning. So we just followed her dreams, but we share lots of similarities, a love of nature and so on, and so it reflects both of us in some ways. But I realised, but it's become a venue that could well be that could well support, and I think it will support my coming business and my coming venture, which is to provide cutting edge education for adults and youth to discover the rules of life, but the unwritten rules. So it's I don't think at the beginning I set it out to be a project where I would do X, Y, Z. It was just going to be a tea house where we could serve up tea, not just coffee, because I've always done things a bit differently. So everywhere's doing coffee, so I thought I'd have tea because I think tea's
Today, first thing you asked us, do you want water, tea, or coffee, right? And you said tea is a little bit hot here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's the Thai tea, right? Chai yin is cold, so there's they also drink tea, right? The British tea with milk, some ice, some nice touch, right?
Well, you could have that if my wife was here, but I don't.
Right.
It's not on my menu.
That's right.
Yeah. But then, if you follow health, you'll be very careful with cold drinks.
Yeah.
But Thai people love their cold drinks.
Yeah, Chinese also have a thing for cold drinks. My mother doesn't like cold drinks.
Well, that would be traditional Chinese medicine,
Yes.
which would definitely say no. And same in India with Ayurveda
Yeah.
and Thai traditional medicine. But they're hot countries.
So you're working on a few things, together at the same time after the book.
Yeah.
So you kind of have this estate that you're still building, right? That you're perfecting, and then you have your education adventure continuing, and at the same time, I think you're also into because I don't know if you sell the herbal healing medicine or whatever, but you're into a particular kind of diet, right? I look at your social media, you have a lot of titles that you kind of characterize yourself into these very diverse areas.
Right.
I mean, to a person who has a career in education, perhaps, they would like to characterize their career as teacher, right? Or educator, but you kind of got into these different areas. Now, this is obviously related to your spiritual journey, but then how do you see yourself into these different areas?
Well, I've got to bring them I've got to bring them all together. But this is probably part of my teaching work, where to understand the whole, we need to know what the parts are. So let's look at all the different parts and then see how they fit the bigger picture all the time. So if you've always got an understanding, if you always know where the bigger picture is, okay, let's take out a part, political, educational, health, philosophical, psychological, whatever it is, let's take out a part, let's understand that, but we can only truly understand it in its connection, where it's come from. So by focusing on all the different parts, we can then understand the whole, but we must always keep sight of the whole. So I think what I'm doing, what I ultimately teach in the classroom and did at PIAP University was, in effect, I was teaching, and this is the loose meaning of the word, I was facilitating and enabling my students to become, to develop and master their listening skills, their speaking skills, their writing and reading skills, their communication skills, their learning skills, and through that, their teaching skills. So in other words, when you go into a classroom with students, or you're a CEO and you go into a board meeting, or you're a manager and you go into a meeting with your workers, you are with a load of people. And you all have, if you make that place somewhere that everybody likes to be, then the heart opens, the mind opens, and learning and progress and evolution are now ready to take place. So that's ultimately what I'm doing. But if I go into a classroom and I improve your listening and speaking skills, what are we going to be talking about? So we've got to have some sort of topic. So it may as well be the topic of self-inquiry, health, relationships, language, energy flow, all the things that make up life. So it turns out that the spiritual revolution is actually catalyzing your understanding of who you are and what life is, and then getting back to the business of living it. But now, with completely different knowledge and understanding driving you forwards. And now, having done the revolutionary bit, which is me transforming myself through understanding, now I can slow down, and now I'm on my spiritual evolution, which is where I'm at now. I'm just on my, and we all are. So I think that all these disparate bits and pieces, they all belong together under the banner of developing your skills, your self-knowledge, and your self-belief. And when you have self-belief, not you personally, but when somebody has self-belief, they have self-knowledge, they understand who they are, and they develop their communication skills. Now they can be the best person they can be, because we are social creatures. Everything we do in life is based on relationships, including with ourselves. And if we're poor communicators, we will suffer with poor relationships. So in effect, I think that what I'm doing with my venture is I'm building up an academy online and here, or in northern Thailand. So in person and online. Online has the reach. You know, last year when I did the training for the spiritual group, I had over 100 in one go. And you can do 100, but I can't get 100 here. But in person is so much more fun. So I think that ultimately what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, here is a toolbox for living life the way it should be lived. If you want your toolbox, come and learn with me, learn how each tool works, go away and start using those tools.
It's actually quite useful. It's a very, very meaningful message. Always nice talking to you about different topics. I saw this comment on social media that everyone talking to you, saying that, especially people who talk to you the first time, they say it's unexpected. The conversation was unexpected. It was interesting, it was fun, but most importantly, it's pretty deep. Very nice talking to you, and looking forward to our talk next time.
Well, thank you, Larry. You had very perceptive questions that allowed me to exemplify and pontificate and say what I said. But yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I enjoyed it very much.
That's right.
Yeah.